Welcome to Nightmare Archives, where stories don't end, they linger. About 70% of you who watch haven't subscribed yet. Hit that button before the next scream finds you. Like, comment, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. Your clicks feed the darkness. Now, let's open tonight's nightmare.
When the SS Euphoria, a luxury cruise liner, set sail for its maiden voyage across the Atlantic, 3,000 passengers board, expecting paradise. But within hours of departure, the ship's course drifts, its navigation systems unresponsive, its crew unreachable. Then come the whispers through the intercom, voices calling names no one recognizes. By dawn, the ocean is gone. Only endless black water surrounds them, and the ship won't stop moving. No one remembers boarding. No one can get off. And every night at 3:17 a.m., someone disappears quietly, as if erased from existence. The Euphoria isn't sailing through the sea. It's drifting through something else. They called it the Voyage of Dreams. A luxury cruise across the Atlantic, 5 days of paradise aboard the newest vessel on the sea, the SS Euphoria. It promised escape, indulgence, perfection. For the 3,000 passengers who boarded that morning, it was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. But paradise has a price, and sometimes it collects early. Soft orchestral music fades under the sound of the ship horn blaring. The Euphoria set sail from Southampton at exactly 9:17 a.m. The captain, Adrian Holt, delivered his speech from the bridge, his voice warm and confident. The sun shimmered across the deck. Children laughed. Couples posed for photos. And as the docks vanished into mist, no one noticed that the sky behind them had turned gray. Low hum, mechanical, faint. Some passengers would later recall that moment. The way the air seemed heavier. The sudden chill, though the forecast had promised clear skies. And the faint metallic taste in the wind, like blood on a coin. Among the passengers was Mira Lane, a travel journalist. She'd been invited to cover the Euphoria's maiden voyage for a lifestyle magazine. She recorded everything: her cabin, the food, the laughter of strangers at the bar. Her final video entry was time-stamped 6:43 p.m. Day 1. Sound, camera, click, gentle music in background. First impressions: this ship's incredible. It's like a floating city. Everyone's so happy. She pauses, slight static. Though I did notice something weird. My cabin key card says deck 7, but the elevators skip from 6 to 8. The steward said deck 7 doesn't exist. So, whose room am I in? Static crackle. Recording cuts off. By nightfall, the fog rolled in. Thick, blinding, swallowing the ship's lights until the ocean and sky became the same colorless void. Sound, deep foghorn, muffled footsteps on metal. The Euphoria slowed to a crawl. Crew members whispered about compass failure navigation systems looping back to the same coordinates. But Captain Holt remained calm. He ordered the music to continue. Dinner was served as scheduled. Music swells. Classical dining atmosphere fades under whispers. Guests toasted to adventure, unaware that the ship had already drifted off its charted course. At 10:03 p.m., a passenger named Derek Palmer reported seeing a woman standing alone on the upper deck facing the fog, whispering into it. When security arrived, she was gone. Only her shoes remained, wet, dripping salt water. Sound, water dripping, echo of waves. CCTV footage showed her walking toward the railing. Then, static. When the feed resumed, she was no longer there. By midnight, more passengers began noticing strange things. Elevators stopping at non-existent floors. Hallway lights flickering in perfect rhythm as if in code. And through the intercom, a soft, distorted voice murmuring between announcements. Intercom crackle. Dinner service will begin at 7. Please enjoy your voyage aboard the UFO glitch. Whispering noise. Ria. They laughed it off as a technical glitch, but Mira didn't. She left her cabin with her recorder, walking the silent corridors. The ship groaned beneath her like something alive. Sound, distant, metallic. Creak, heartbeat-like thump. When she reached the lower deck, she found a door unmarked, sealed shut with rivets. Beside it, a sign half scraped off. Crew access, deck 7. Sound fades, soft water echoes begin. She knocked. From inside, something knocked back. At dawn, the ship's morning roll call listed 3,000 passengers aboard. By noon, it listed 2,999. No announcement, no search. Just one less voice at breakfast. Wind picks up eerie silence before final line. The Euphoria sailed on, deeper into the fog, and the sea swallowed her wake. Morning came with a hollow kind of silence. No birds, no waves, just the endless hum of machinery echoing through the hull, a sound that felt less like motion and more like breathing. The passengers moved about as if nothing had happened. Buffet lines, laughter, champagne. The missing woman wasn't mentioned. Her name was removed from the manifest before anyone could ask. It was as if she'd never been there at all. But Mira remembered. She remembered the dripping shoes, the saltwater footprints that ended at the edge of the deck, and the knocking from behind that sealed door marked Deck 7. Low mechanical thump, a faint whisper beneath it. That morning, she went searching for answers. The ship's lower levels were off limits to passengers, but no one stopped her. No security, no crew. It was as if the deeper she went, the fewer people existed. The hallways down there were colder, painted in flaking white. Pipes hissed overhead, and from somewhere unseen, a steady crackling noise filled the air, soft, rhythmic, like a detuned radio. She followed it to the communications room. Inside, screens flickered. Recorders clicked and spun. The intercom system, the same one that played cheerful announcements, was still running, looping through old recordings. At least, that's what Mira thought. Until she listened closely. Low, distorted whisper fades in like a voice deep in static. Mira, can you hear me? She froze. The voice came again. Her name buried in static. Not live, but recorded. Every tape on the desk was labeled with the same time code. 3:17 a.m. The hour the woman vanished. The hour the cameras glitched. Ambient tone grows uneasy, deep pulsing bass beneath it. Mira replayed another tape. The sound was faint at first, just wind and ocean. Then came footsteps. Then the voice of Captain Holt. Stay calm. Do not go below Deck 7. It's not meant for them. Then, silence, followed by something that wasn't human, breathing through the mic. Wet, slow, like gills opening underwater. Mira tore off the headphones, trembling. But even without them, the whispering didn't stop. It was in the walls now, all around her. The hum of the ship distorts, blending with whispering voices. She turned off every switch she could find, but the voices grew louder, clearer, overlapping one another. some begging, some screaming, some speaking words that no longer made sense. And then she heard her own voice. "Don't listen to them. You were never supposed to be here." She stumbled out of the room, breath shaking. The corridor lights flickered in unison. Every few seconds, they cut to black. And in those flashes of darkness, she saw faces, waterlogged, pale, staring from behind the glass panels of cabin doors. Passengers who weren't there before. Passengers who didn't blink. Mira ran, her footsteps echoing through the empty hall, until she reached an intersection. There on the wall hung a small directory map of the ship. It showed every deck but one. There was no Deck 7. Only a faint outline where it should have been a shadowed layer between the engine room and the cargo hold. Someone had scratched into the glass beneath it. "Don't knock twice. Low bass tone begins heartbeat rhythm. Ocean rumble beneath." That night, the whispers grew. Louder. Passengers began hearing them through the vents. Some said the voices were calling them by name. Others claimed to hear music playing from somewhere beneath the ship, a warped echo of the ballroom orchestra above. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the power flickered, the music stopped, and the intercom came alive once more. Static crackle, then faint voice the captain's, breaking apart in distortion. "This is your captain speaking. Please remain in your cabins. We are adjusting course. Everything is fine." But when Mira checked the navigation screen on the wall, the map showed no location, no coordinates, just black. The Euphoria wasn't moving forward or backward. It was drifting in circles. And through the static of the dead radio, she heard a whisper that made her blood run cold. "Deck 7 is open." Silence. Then a faint metallic clang like a heavy door unlatching below. The next morning, the fog was thicker than ever. The passengers smiled, drank, and danced. But behind their eyes, something was wrong. They moved too slowly, spoke too softly. And when Mira tried to ask one of them if they heard the voices, they simply turned and smiled, with lips too pale, whispering, "You shouldn't have listened." Static builds, rising tension, deep droning hum. Below deck, water began seeping through the cracks in the walls. The ship groaned again, as if something enormous had shifted in its hull, and from deep beneath the decks came a second sound. Not the engine, not the sea, but breathing. Something alive was moving under the ship. Music fades into soft ocean rumble. The Euphoria sailed on, wrapped in fog and static. And Mira Lane finally realized this wasn't just a cruise. It was a recording. A voyage repeating itself, over and over. Long silence. Faint whisper returns. 3:17, 3:17, 3:17. By the third day, the ocean had changed. It was no longer blue, not even gray. It had turned a color no one could name, a shade that looked alive when the light touched it. Passengers gathered along the rails, murmuring to each other, watching the horizon blur into endless fog. The ship's schedule continued. Breakfast, games, music, all as if nothing was wrong. But the smiles had begun to feel rehearsed. Too steady, too still. Mira stood alone at the stern, recording. The fog had thickened overnight, dense and unmoving, like walls of smoke surrounding them on every side. The ship was trapped in a circle of its own making, and yet that morning she saw something. Soft hum builds faint echo of a horn in the distance. Through the fog, a dark shape moved. Large, silent, another vessel. At first, it looked like a reflection, the Euphoria's mirrored twin floating on calm water. But as the mist shifted, the illusion broke. There were no lights on that ship, no music, no sound. Just an identical silhouette drifting parallel to theirs, black and still. Against the horizon, Mira ran to the bridge. Captain Holt was already there, staring through the glass with eyes that didn't blink. The radar showed nothing, no other vessel in range. And yet the shadow remained, keeping pace beside them as though tethered by an invisible current. When Mira asked what it was, the captain finally spoke. His voice was flat, as if reading from a script. "We don't look at it. That's not us." Faint static crackles. She tried to press him, but he turned away, whispering under his breath. "They said it would follow again." Low, mechanical groaning. The ocean seems to pulse with sound. That night, the Euphoria's lights dimmed across all decks. Passengers gathered along the rails again, pointing into the darkness. The second ship was closer, now close enough to see details. Its name was painted in the same place on the hull, the same letters, the same logo. But the name wasn't Euphoria. It was Euphoria 2, and its windows glowed faintly red from within. Mira filmed as best she could, zooming across the waves. Through the lens, she saw figures standing on that deck, rows of them, motionless, all facing her. Each of them wet, pale, and perfectly still. Low bass drone, heartbeats faint beneath. Then one of them raised a hand, and at that exact moment, the lights on Mira's ship went out. Panic spread across the decks. Screams, footsteps pounding down corridors. The emergency lights flickered dim red, painting everything in a sickly glow. Mira found herself near the promenade, pressed against the glass. The reflection showed the crowd behind her, frantic, terrified. But something was wrong with that reflection. In the mirrored surface, the passengers weren't panicking. They were calm, smiling. And one by one, their reflections began to turn and stare directly at Mira. Distorted whispering fills the background, many overlapping voices. She stepped back. The reflection stepped forward. The glass began to fog from the other side, a pale hand pressing against it, her hand, but dripping with salt water. The reflection whispered something she could barely make out. "We're waiting for you." Sound, water sloshing, low metallic clangs echoing through the hull. The ship's power returned just before dawn. The fog began to thin. The passengers were dazed, silent, as though none of it had happened. But Mira didn't sleep. She stood by the window, eyes locked on the horizon. And there, miles away, she saw it again, the Euphoria 2. Following, drifting just beyond reach. Its shape faded slowly into the mist until it vanished completely. By noon, the intercom crackled back to life. A cheerful voice, too cheerful, announced the next day's activities. "Good morning, passengers. It's a beautiful day at sea. Join us tonight for the Captain's Gala in the Grand Ballroom." But there was something off about the voice. It wasn't the captain's anymore. It was Mira's. Soft static hisses, blending with faint ocean sounds. She replayed her camera footage later that evening, frame by frame. In one still, reflected in the black water beside the ship, she saw her own face, but the reflection wasn't holding a camera. It was waving. Pause. Then a deep, distant horn from the other ship. And somewhere out there, in that endless fog, the Euphoria 2 blew its horn back. Low music swells dark, haunting strings. The passengers slept soundly that night. But Mira stayed awake, staring out her cabin window. The sea was no longer water. It was glass, and she swore she could see something moving beneath it, an entire world, inverted and drowned, pulling them closer with every mile. Sound fades to silence. Then a faint voice, whispering through static, "You're not sailing the ocean, Mira. The ocean is sailing you." The fog was still there, thicker than ever. It had been 3 days since the song. Euphoria had last reported its position 3 days since anyone on board had seen sunlight. Yet the passengers moved on, trapped in their routines. Breakfast, drinks, smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. The ship's ballroom played its usual music, cheerful and hollow. And above it all, the intercom looped the same cheerful greeting, word for word, every hour. Even when no one was at the controls. Mira stopped recording days ago. She'd begun hearing whispers and playback voices that weren't hers, and faces in the background of shots she didn't remember filming. Every time she tried to delete them, the files reappeared, and with each loop, the faces got clearer. That morning, she found something on her cabin floor. A photograph. Old. Faded. The edges water-damaged. It showed a group of passengers standing on a deck that looked exactly like the one outside her window. Their clothing was different, old-fashioned, early 1960 seconds, but the banner behind them was the same. "Welcome aboard the SS Euphoria." She studied their faces, one by one, until she froze, because she recognized one of them. Her, Mira Lane. Smiling, same face, same eyes. But the photo was dated the 12th of June, 1962. Low drone fades in soft heartbeat undercurrent. She went door to door, asking if anyone else had found photographs. Some slammed the door in her face. Others smiled in that strange, glassy way she'd grown to fear. But one man, a retired engineer named Thomas, pulled her into his cabin and locked the door. He had dozens of them spread across his bed, black and white photos, all showing the same ship, the same passengers, the same faces, repeating across decades. Thomas pointed to one image of the captain standing by the helm. The man's name tag read, Holt. Same name, same face, just younger. "It's the same crew," Thomas whispered. "Every time, new voyage, same people, different year." He showed her a final photograph, one taken in 1983. In the background, through the fog, the faint outline of another ship appeared, the same double they'd seen days ago. "It follows us," he said. "Every time we sail, the other Euphoria is where we end up. It's where we go when we're done here." Low hum begins to build, distorted, mechanical, distant. That night, the intercom came to life again. But it wasn't the captain's voice. It wasn't Mira's either. It was dozens of voices, layered together, whispering, gasping, crying, speaking through static. "We've been here before. Don't open the door. Deck 7 is hungry." The power flickered. Every cabin light went dark, one by one. Mira grabbed her flashlight and ran to find Thomas. When she reached his cabin, the door was wide open. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs, but the faces had changed. Every photo now showed the same empty deck. No people. Just the ship, floating alone in fog. And on the bed, where the pictures had been, she found Thomas's hat soaked through with seawater. Sound, dripping water, distant thunder. She stumbled into the hall, shaking. Water was seeping from beneath the cabin doors. Passengers were standing in silence. eyes glazed over, heads tilted as if listening to something deep below. From the intercom, the cheerful voice returned, "Good evening, passengers. Tonight we'll be showing a slideshow of past voyages in the Grand Ballroom. Attendance is mandatory." Soft, haunting waltz music fades in warped and slow. Mira followed the others down to the ballroom. The lights were dim, the stage illuminated by the projector's flicker. One by one, the photographs appeared on the screen, but they weren't old anymore. They were new, showing this voyage, this week, these people. And then she saw herself again, front row, looking straight at the camera. Her expression, lifeless. Static bleeds into the sound. Projector clicking. She turned to look at the crowd, but everyone had vanished. The chairs were empty, rows of them creaking softly as the ship rocked. She was alone until the last slide appeared. A photo of the ballroom itself, empty, except for one figure standing at the screen. Her, holding the camera, smiling. Low-frequency tone rises slowly, like the sound of the ship inhaling. The projector went dark. Silence. Then a faint dripping from the ceiling. Salt water began pooling on the floor, reflecting the faint glow of the exit signs, and in that shimmering reflection, she saw something standing behind her. She turned, nothing there. Looked back down and saw dozens of faces staring up through the water's surface, pressed against the glass-like pool from below. Sound. Faint, muffled screams beneath water. They were all the same faces from the photographs, frozen in terror, reaching upward. Mira stumbled back, gasping, as the reflection of her own face began to ripple and twist. Her eyes turned black. Her mouth moved, but the voice that came out wasn't hers. "Welcome back." Water surges, the sound of rushing waves fills the room. Then, silence. By morning, the ballroom was spotless. The floor gleamed. The lights hummed. Passengers laughed again. No one remembered the slideshow. No one mentioned Thomas. Mira sat by the window, holding one last photograph she'd found beneath her pillow. It showed the same ballroom, empty, except for her sitting exactly where she was now. Soft whisper fades in. "We never left." The ship groaned, deep and heavy, as though turning in its sleep. Outside, through the fog, the faint glow of the Euphoria 2 returned. Drifting closer, the fog never lifted. By the fifth day, it had become a wall around the Euphoria, pale and silent, stretching in every direction. The ocean beneath the ship didn't move anymore. It was too still, too dark, almost solid. The passengers carried on with their routines. But Mira noticed something new. Every time she passed them in the corridors, they smiled at her first, even the ones she hadn't met. It was as if they knew her. And when she looked away, she could feel their eyes following too long, too still. That morning, she found another note under her cabin door. It was written on damp paper, the ink smudged into gray streaks. "Deck 7 is open." The same words she'd heard through the radio 2 nights before. A low hum builds, like an engine far below. She followed the narrow staircase down to the service corridors. The air grew colder with every step, heavy with salt and rust. Pipes hissed overhead, and the walls sweated seawater. When she reached the end of the corridor, she saw it again. The door, unmarked, steel, sealed with rivets, like something the ship wanted to forget. And this time, it was open. A slow creak of metal as the door drags open. Silence follows. The room beyond was wrong. It looked like another part of the ship, identical corridors, same lights, but everything was decayed. Walls blackened by water damage, furniture rotted and warped, the air thick with the smell of the deep ocean. Every sound echoed too long, as if the walls weren't solid. And under it all, she could hear the faint sound of something moving in the dark, a rhythm like a heartbeat, pulsing through the floor. She raised her flashlight. Its beam shimmered across puddles that shouldn't have been there. The water didn't ripple when she stepped into it. It just accepted her. Deeper in, she found rows of cabins. Each door had a number the same numbers as the passenger rooms above. She pushed one open and froze. Inside was her own cabin. Same layout, same suitcase, same photo on the desk. But the bed was soaked through, sheets tangled in black seaweed. And lying on the pillow was a recording device, identical to hers. It was already on, already recording. Click, soft static hum. Then her own voice played back. "Don't come down here, Mira. This isn't a place, it's a reflection." She dropped the recorder. The playback continued anyway. "You opened the wrong door. Now it knows you." Deep metallic groaning swells under the voice. Water dripping quickens. The lights flickered. Somewhere behind her, a door slammed shut. The air grew colder, so cold her breath came out white. Then she heard footsteps, wet, slow, dragging, coming closer. She hid behind the open cabin door. The footsteps stopped right outside. Through the crack, she saw bare feet pale, waterlogged, leaving trails of salt across the floor. The figure paused, breathing heavily. Then, in a voice that sounded half underwater, it whispered, "You left us down here." A single deep bass note. The ship creaks violently. The floor beneath her shuddered. Water burst through the cracks in the tiles, flooding the corridor. She ran, splashing, through freezing water that rose higher with every step back toward the open door to the upper deck. When she reached it, the passage was gone. The walls had shifted. The hallway curved into itself like a maze. And far ahead, she saw a faint red glow pulsing from the darkness. She followed it, desperate. The light led her into a massive chamber, one she'd never seen on any map. It looked like the bottom of the ship, or maybe its heart. The walls were lined with glass panels filled with black water, each one glowing faintly. Inside those panels floated bodies, thousands of them, men, women, children. Their faces pressed against the glass, eyes open, mouths moving as though whispering beneath the surface. Soft overlapping whispers fade in unintelligible, growing louder. Mira pressed a trembling hand to the glass. The body nearest to her turned its head. It was her. Same face, same eyes. But this version smiled. "You were always one of us." The glass cracked. Sharp sound of shattering, water rushing in. The chamber erupted, black water flooding the floor, screams muffled by the rush. Mira ran through the rising flood, searching for any exit. The water swallowed the lights, swallowed the floor, until she was waist deep, then chest deep, then silence. She gasped. The water was gone, the chamber dry again, the light steady, but the door behind her had vanished. When she finally climbed back to the upper decks, the sun was shining. The passengers were laughing. The music played again as if nothing had happened. Only her hands were still wet. She stumbled to the nearest mirror, and saw that her reflection lagged half a second behind. Low drone returns heartbeat slow rhythm. Later that night, she tried to sleep, but the sound came again, a slow knocking, somewhere deep beneath her bed. She pressed her ear to the floorboards. The knocking stopped. Then, from below, came a whisper, her own voice. "You never left Deck 7. The morning after Deck 7, Mira didn't speak to anyone. She couldn't, because every voice she heard, every laugh, every whisper, sounded a little too much like her own. Even her footsteps had changed. When she walked the halls, she heard another pair following just behind her, in perfect rhythm, always one step out of sync. She told herself it was paranoia, that the air vents, the metal floors, the long, echoing corridors were playing tricks on her mind. But deep down, she knew better. Something had followed her back from below. That evening, she returned to her cabin. The air felt colder. The mirror on the wall was fogged over from the inside, and her voice recorder, the one she dropped in the flooded corridor, was sitting on her desk, perfectly dry. The red light was blinking. Click. Soft, static hum. She pressed play. At first, it was just the sound of her breathing. Then, another voice joined in. "You shouldn't have come back." Her voice, but distant, warped, and echoing as if it had been recorded underwater. She rewound the tape, listened again. This time, the voice added something new. "You're in my room." Long pause. The ship creaks faintly. Mira froze. The voice wasn't coming from the recorder anymore. It was coming from behind her. She turned slowly. The cabin door was closed. The window was dark, fog pressing against the glass like a heavy breath. And in the reflection, she saw movement. Her reflection had turned to face her, even though she hadn't moved. Low drone begins deep, trembling. The reflection smiled first, then it raised its hand and pressed it against the glass. Mira's own hand stayed at her side. A crack appeared in the mirror, spidering outward, and through the thin web of glass, she heard it whisper, "Let me out." A slow pulse of static. Lights flicker. She stumbled back, hitting the wall. The ship lurched suddenly, as if something massive had brushed against its hull. Then the intercom came alive, blaring that same cheerful voice. "Good evening, passengers. Tonight's entertainment begins in the ballroom at 9 sharp. Remember, attendance is required." The lights flickered again. When they steadied, the mirror was whole, her reflection normal. She breathed hard. But when she opened the door to leave, there was something waiting on the floor. A Polaroid. It showed her standing outside her cabin exactly where she was now. Same posture. Same expression. Except in the photo, something stood behind her. A hand on her shoulder. She ran, down the hall, past the laughing passengers, past the glowing chandeliers that buzzed too loudly. The sound of footsteps followed her again, wet, dragging, matching her pace. She stopped. The footsteps stopped. She started walking backward, and the other steps moved forward. Tension built soft rumble under the voice. She bolted for the upper deck, bursting through the heavy doors into the cold fog. The air smelled of salt and rot. The sea around the ship was completely still. She leaned against the railing, gasping, trying to think, and then she saw her reflection again. Not in the glass this time, in the water. The reflection was smiling, and slowly it raised its hand, pointing at something behind her. Soft click, slow intake of breath. Mira turned. There was a figure standing by the lifeboats, pale, soaked, hair hanging over its face. It looked exactly like her. Same clothes, same movements. It tilted its head, then spoke in a soft, wet whisper. "You left me below. You shouldn't have done that." Creak of metal. Wind starts to rise. The figure stepped closer, bare feet slapping against the deck. Water pooled where it walked. Mira backed away until she hit the railing. The figure smiled. "There's no up or down here, just the ship. You belong to it now." Then it lunged, and the world went black. Silence. Only the sound of breathing. Then, faint static. When Mira woke, she was in her cabin again, dry, unharmed, as if nothing had happened. Only one thing was different. There were 2 voice recorders on her desk now, both blinking red. She pressed play on the first. Her voice spoke softly. "This is Mira, day 5. I think I'm losing myself." Then the second one began to play the same voice, but colder, lower. "This is Mira, day 1. I think I just arrived." The 2 recordings overlap. One fast, one slow, distorted, unnatural. She looked up. The mirror across the room showed 2 reflections now, both moving, neither matching her. By the 7th day, Mira stopped counting time. The clocks on board no longer matched. The digital ones blinked between random numbers. The analog hands spun in slow, lazy circles. But the ship kept moving through fog that never changed, across water that no longer rippled. It wasn't sailing anymore. It was drifting. And sometimes, when she leaned over the railing, she thought she could see her reflection, but it wasn't her face looking back. That morning, the captain made an announcement. His voice sounded brittle, like something old replaying itself. "Attention, passengers. We are adjusting course due to atmospheric interference. Please remain calm." But outside, nothing moved. The sea stretched flat and silver, blending into the sky. And just beyond the fog, faintly Mira saw lights. Dozens of them. They blinked in a slow, mechanical rhythm. Like windows. Like another ship. Low-frequency hum builds the sound of radio interference. She went to the communications room, hoping to find answers. The door was unlocked. Inside, the radios crackled with static, endless, hissing static. One speaker emitted a faint voice, buried beneath the noise. "This is the Euphoria. Can anyone hear us? We're off course. There's something in the fog." Mira froze. Because she knew that voice. It was hers. Soft, static pulses, growing louder. She turned the dial slowly, searching for clarity. The voice grew stronger, desperate, panicked. "If you find this, don't board the ship. Don't let it see you." Then silence. And through that silence came another sound. A heartbeat. Slow, deliberate, mechanical. It was the same rhythm she'd heard on Deck 7. She stepped closer to the speaker. The static hissed, building until it became something else entirely. The sound of waves, then screams, then click. Sudden silence. The speaker went dead. But the message printer beside it began to move on its own. Paper sliding out, line after line. When it stopped, she tore it free. There was only one sentence printed on the page. "You are not where you think you are." Deep metallic groan echoes through the ship. She stumbled back as the room flickered. For a moment, the walls changed. The clean white panels corroded into rusted metal. The ceiling dripped black water. And in the reflection of the radio glass, she saw movement, the shadow of someone standing directly behind her. She turned. Nothing there. only the fog seeping through the cracks in the door, curling like smoke. She ran to the upper deck. The lights beyond the fog were closer, now bright, golden, arranged in rows. It was another cruise ship, identical in every detail. Same name, Euphoria. The two ships drifted side by side, mirrors of each other. And on the opposite deck, through the haze, she saw people standing, passengers, dozens of them, all waving slowly. She raised her hand. The figure across from her did the same at the same time. Perfectly synchronized. Soft drone, slow heartbeat pulse. She squinted through the fog and realized she was looking at herself. A perfect copy. Standing on the deck of the other ship, the copy smiled, then raised a radio to her lips. Static crackled across both decks. We've tried turning back, but there's nowhere to go. The hum deepens, as if the ocean itself is alive. The fog thickened, swallowing the other ship whole. When it cleared again, the lights were gone. The water was still. Only silence remained. Mira dropped to her knees, trembling. Her reflection in the black water looked up at her, calm, patient, waiting. And when she blinked, the reflection didn't. We are the wake, not the ship. Later that night, she returned to her cabin. Every surface was damp. Her journal was soaked through, pages warped, ink bleeding. But one word kept reappearing across every page, written over and over again in her own handwriting. Stay. She tore out the pages, scattering them on the floor. Then she looked up and saw that every word she'd written had appeared on the walls. Dozens of stays, smeared like fingerprints across the wallpaper. The mirror across the room pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, and from within it came the faint echo of her own voice, whispering, overlapping, infinite. You are the signal. You are the storm. You never left. The ship creaks violently. A deep rumble shakes the floor. Outside, lightning flashed across the fog, illuminating the silhouette of the other Euphoria, drifting closer again. And this time, the two ships were on a collision course. Thunder crashes, metal groans, static floods the sound. Then, silence, just the sound of waves. When the light returned, Mira stood alone on the deck. No second ship, no fog. Only calm, endless sea. The radio on the railing crackled to life. Her own voice spoke from it once more. Calm now, almost gentle. If you're hearing this, you're next. The impact never came, at least, not the way Mira expected it to. There was a blinding flash when the two ships met, but instead of tearing apart, they passed through each other. No explosion, no wreckage, just silence. When the fog lifted, the world looked almost the same, almost. The sky had turned gray-green, the clouds unmoving. The sea shimmered like glass, solid and depthless. And the ship around her looked cleaner, brighter, too perfect. No rust, no cracks, no damage. But when she looked closer, she saw the truth. Every surface was polished like a mirror. Every reflection slightly delayed. It wasn't her ship anymore. It was the other one. Soft hum rises mechanical heartbeat. She wandered the decks, searching for another soul. The passengers were there, standing still, smiling. But none of them blinked. Their eyes reflected light like wet marble. When she spoke, they turned toward her in unison, heads tilting, as though they'd heard something faint but familiar. And then, one by one, they began to whisper, "We're on our way back." Their voices were hollow, overlapping, and yet eerily calm. Mira ran. She darted through corridors that twisted in, ways they hadn't before, hallways looping back into themselves, staircases leading to nowhere. The Euphoria was changing, folding, as if it couldn't decide which version of itself to be. She found the captain's quarters. Inside, the logbook lay open on the desk. But instead of words, every page was filled with the same sentence written over and over again. We reached our destination. The last entry had a date that shouldn't exist. The 12th of June, 1962. A long pause. The faint ticking of an unseen clock. Mira flipped through the pages and froze. A photograph slipped out. It showed her standing beside the captain, shaking his hand, smiling. Her name was typed neatly at the bottom. First Officer, Mira Lane. Low drone deepens the air, vibrates faintly. She stumbled backward, dropping the photo. The room's reflection in the window didn't match. In the glass, the captain stood behind her, smiling faintly though in the real room. She was alone. The radio on the wall clicked to life. Her voice came through again, soft and trembling. We tried to turn back, but there's nothing behind us anymore. Only the ship. Then a second voice joined in deeper, slower. The captain's. We are the wake. We travel in circles until memory fades. When it's forgotten, it begins again. Static builds. Footsteps echo faintly behind the voice. The floor tilted. Mira grabbed the desk for balance. The world flickered just for a second, and she was somewhere else. The same room, but older, rotting. Walls dripping black water, air thick with salt and decay. Outside the window, lightning revealed the other ship again, the living one, bright and clean, drifting parallel to her own decayed twin. Through the rain, she saw herself standing on its deck, staring back at her. Both Miras separated by fog and glass. Two ships, two versions of the same voyage. And slowly, both ships began to drift closer. The hum intensifies distorted, overlapping tones. She screamed, but the sound didn't escape her throat. The glass between the worlds rippled, bending light like water. And then she heard her own voice again, not from the radio, but from everywhere. Every voyage begins the same way. Every voyage ends with me. The mirror in front of her cracked. Through the fracture, she saw not her face but hundreds of others, every version of herself who had ever sailed this ship. They spoke together, their voices layered into a single endless whisper. We never left. Silence. The hum fades. When Mira opened her eyes again, she was standing on the deck. The sea was gone. The ship floated in black stillness, no sky, no horizon. Only an endless void of dark water that didn't move. Behind her, the passengers stood at the railing, gazing into the void. One by one, they began to step forward, silently, calmly, and disappear into the black. Mira tried to scream, but her voice came out distorted, doubled, as if another mouth were speaking through hers. We reached our destination. She turned toward the reflection in the glass wall. Her other self stood there, smiling, holding out her hand. It's your turn now. A slow, deep creak. Water rushing upward. The ship began to sink, not into water, but into its own reflection. As the deck tilted, the sky above rippled, swallowing everything in silver light. Then, silence. After a long pause, the faint sound of waves returns calm, endless. Somewhere far away, a new ship horn echoed through the fog. Soft, distant. Another voyage beginning. And in that fog, a woman's voice whispered through the static, "Welcome aboard the Euphoria." When the ship stopped moving, it didn't feel like rest. It felt like holding its breath. Mira woke to silence. No music. No engines. Even the lights seemed afraid to flicker. Something had changed during the night. Her cabin door was locked from the outside, and on the floor, slid neatly through the gap beneath it, was a single envelope, unmarked, damp. She tore it open with shaking fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed, salt-stained, titled in elegant type, "Passenger Manifest Euphoria, Voyage 000. A slow, hollow chime sounds, like a bell underwater. The list began normally. Names, cabin numbers, dates, row after row of strangers, until she reached the bottom. Her own name, Mira Lane. Then again, Mira Lane. And again, dozens of times. Each one beside a different date, years apart, decades. The last entry was blank, waiting for the next date to be filled. A deep pulse swells beneath the voice. At the very end of the list, written in red ink, was a short note. Upon completion of voyage, passenger returns to manifest. She pounded on the door until her hands bled. When it finally opened, no one stood there, only fog seeping through the hallway. The ship's PA system clicked on. "Good morning, passengers," it said cheerfully. "We'll soon be updating our records for the next journey." The voice paused, as if smiling. "Please remain in your cabins until called." Static hum, faint whispering behind the announcement. She stepped into the corridor. The walls pulsed faintly, like veins under pale skin. Every cabin door bore a number, and beneath each number, a small brass slot where a nameplate should be. But the plates were missing, all of them, except one, cabin 213. The plate read, "Lane, Mira." The low hum turns rhythmic like the slow beat of an unseen propeller. She opened the door. Inside was a room identical to hers, but older wallpaper peeling, furniture rotted, mirror blackened with mold. A figure sat at the desk, back turned, writing in a leather ledger. "Mira?" she whispered. The figure didn't move. It kept writing, slow, deliberate. Then it spoke in a voice that was hers, only lower, cracked with age. "You can't change the list. You only add to it." The figure turned, her own face pale, eyes hollow, years older. A hand reached toward her, dripping seawater onto the floor. "Sign it, or you'll drift forever." Sharp inhale. The hum deepens to a vibration. Mira stumbled back, slamming the door, but the walls around her began to breathe. Names appeared across the wallpaper, faint and glowing. Every one of them hers. She ran, up the stairs, down corridors that curved and looped, until she reached the grand ballroom. The chandeliers burned with cold blue light. Rows of tables were set for dinner, silverware perfectly aligned, though no one was sitting. And at the far end stood a podium with an open book resting on it. The ledger. She stepped closer. The pages fluttered on their own, as if turned by wind that didn't exist. Names filled the paper like a living script. Passengers, crewmates, generations, and scattered throughout, her own. She reached the final blank page. The pen was waiting there, balanced perfectly on the line. Soft whispering rises dozens of overlapping voices, all her own. "Sign, and the ship will let you sleep. Refuse, and the sea keeps you awake. The air thickened with salt. She could smell iron, rust, something old and human. She picked up the pen. Its metal was cold, colder than water. Her hand shook. "Who built this?" she whispered, and the whispering voices answered as one. "You did." Thunderless boom, deep resonance, like a wave hitting from inside the hull. The ink spread across the page before she could touch it. It wrote her name for her perfectly, patiently. Then the chandeliers flickered out. Darkness swallowed the room. When the lights returned, the ballroom was empty. No tables, no book, only her voice recorder lying in the center of the floor, blinking red. She picked it up and pressed play. Her own voice filled the room, calm, hollow. Recorded long ago. Passenger manifest. Complete. Preparing for next departure. Soft engine hum. Returns deep and steady. The ship was moving again. Through fog. Through nothing. And from the intercom, that same bright, cheerful tone. "Welcome aboard, new passengers. Your journey begins now." The fog thinned by morning, but the sea was gone. What stretched beyond the rails wasn't water anymore. It was something thicker, black, glossy, unmoving. When she dropped a coin over the side, it didn't splash. It just sank slow, deliberate, as though the darkness had swallowed it whole. Mira leaned over the railing. Far below, faint shapes pulsed beneath the surface. They were vast, moving, breathing, and when the light caught one of them just right, she saw the reflection of a hull, a ship's underside, only larger, much larger, as if something was sailing beneath the Euphoria, mirroring its path exactly. Low, creaking groan, the heartbeat hum, swells faintly. The captain's voice came over the loudspeakers, slow, distorted by static. "All passengers, please remain indoors. We are entering the Black Wake." Mira froze. The Black Wake. She'd seen that name once before in the captain's old log, written across the final page. Entered the Black Wake. Crew lost. She ran to the bridge. No one was there. The wheel turned itself, slow and steady, following a course that didn't exist. Through the window, the world outside had turned completely black. No stars, no horizon, just endless, heaving void. She pressed her hand to the glass, and the ship shuddered beneath her touch. Something brushed against the hull. Something alive. A deep rumble like thunder beneath the water. She rushed down to the observation deck. The walls trembled. The air tasted of iron and oil. Below the viewing glass, movement slow and serpentine. An eye the size of a lifeboat opened beneath the ship. A pale blue iris, wide and unblinking. It was looking up. And for the first time, Mira understood the Euphoria wasn't sailing on the ocean. It was being carried. A deep vibration builds metallic, throbbing. She followed the sound to the engine room. There, the machinery was gone, replaced by living tissue, breathing where metal used to be. Pipes pulsed like veins. The gears dripped salt water. In the center of it all, a single door stood half open, a door that shouldn't exist. Beyond it, only darkness, and something whispering. Her voice. "You've reached the end of the sea. Keep going." She stepped through. Everything goes quiet, only her breathing, and a faint drip. It was a corridor, narrow and cold. The walls were made of wet glass. and inside each panel floated faces passengers she'd seen before, eyes closed as if sleeping. As she passed, some of them opened their eyes. Their mouths moved soundlessly, mouthing the same word, below. Floor beneath her feet began to slope downward. The hum grew louder, deeper, until it wasn't a sound anymore, but a heartbeat shaking the entire world. At the corridor's end was a chamber, circular, walls dripping black water. In the center, a hole, perfectly round, filled with that same oily sea. Something rose slowly from it. A shape, a figure, herself, but not living. Her eyes were black and shining, her hair floating as if underwater. She smiled. "This ship isn't ours, Mira. We're part of it." The figure stepped closer, and her voice grew deeper, layered with dozens of others. Every voyage, it feeds. On memory, on names, on those who try to leave. Mira stumbled backward. Her reflection reached for her, dripping black liquid that burned through the floor. You can't escape what remembers you. Long silence. Then, a distant thud, rhythmic, echoing like drums. The ship was sinking again, not downward, but inward, decks folding over one another, cabins sliding into the dark. Through the porthole, she saw the thing beneath the true body of the Euphoria, an endless shape of ribs and eyes and decks upon decks of forgotten passengers, all whispering in unison. "We are the wake." She ran, up through the corridors, toward the light above. The air turned thick, hard to breathe. Her legs grew heavy, her reflection in every window moving a split second faster than she did. She reached the deck. The black sea stretched endlessly, and there, in the distance, faint lights. Another ship. She blinked. Its name gleamed across the bow. Euphoria. Identical. Her ship wasn't the only one. There were many, sailing the same course, all trapped in the same circle. And as they drifted closer, she saw people on their decks, people who looked exactly like her, staring back through the fog. Low hum fades. Only the sound of the sea remains. Somewhere deep below, the heartbeat stopped, and for a moment, the world went completely still. Then came the whisper, soft, cold, infinite. One voyage ends, another begins. The black water surged upward. She woke to sunlight, soft, golden, impossibly warm. The air smelled like salt and lilies. For a moment, she thought it was morning. For a moment, she thought she was alive. Then she looked around. She was standing on a deck she had never seen before. It stretched endlessly in every direction, lined with white chairs and old gramophones. The sea around it shimmered like glass, perfectly still. And on each chair sat a passenger, silent, motionless, staring toward the horizon. Their faces looked peaceful, too still. Soft wind brushes the microphone, carrying faint voices beneath it. Mira moved between them, whispering names under her breath. She recognized some of them. The woman with the blue scarf who danced in the ballroom. The boy who'd played cards by the window. The old man who'd asked if the ship had a chapel. All of them sat quietly now, eyes open but unseeing. In their laps, each held a single item, a photograph, a ring, a folded letter, something small enough to remember them by. A voice came from behind her. "We call this the morning deck." She turned. The captain stood at the railing, uniform pressed, hat shadowing his eyes, but his skin was gray, paper thin. His lips didn't quite move when he spoke. distant sound of bells ringing underwater. "Every voyage ends here," he said softly. "Every soul gets one moment to sit and remember who they were before they fade." Mira stared at the passengers. "They're dead," she whispered. He nodded. "Not yet. Memory keeps them here. When the ship turns, they forget, and we begin again." She stepped closer. "Why me? Why do I remember?" The captain smiled faintly. "Because you built it, Mira." Her breath caught. "No, I didn't," he interrupted. "Every vessel needs a heart. And every heart begins with guilt." A slow rumble beneath faint, like thunder rolling through metal. The sunlight flickered. The sea beneath the deck began to ripple. One by one, the passengers turned their heads toward her. Their eyes glowed faintly, milky white. Their lips moved together, whispering a single phrase that barely rose above the wind. "She remembers." The captain tilted his head. "You kept us afloat, Mira. You kept the wake alive. When you refused to let go, the ship found you. It became you." She shook her head. "I was just a passenger." "No," he said gently. "You were the architect." A sudden drop in all sound. Then, the creak of wood under pressure. The deck began to bend. Planks groaned, curling upward as though something massive stirred below. The passengers didn't move their bodies, stayed still, but their shadows began to slide across the deck toward her, reaching out like water. Mira stumbled backward. The captain watched calmly. "You can free them," he said, "but it will cost you your reflection." "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means you'll vanish, but the ship will forget. The circle will break." She hesitated, and in that silence, the passengers began to speak all at once, their voices merging into a tidal wave of sorrow. "End it, end it, end it." Wind rises, a soft crescendo. The hum deepens, like an approaching storm. Mira knelt beside one of the passengers, the woman with the blue scarf. She took the woman's hand, cold, porcelain smooth. The woman turned her eyes toward her and whispered, "We just wanted to arrive." Mira felt tears sting her eyes. She stood, facing the captain. "What happens if I refuse?" He looked toward the horizon, where the sun was already dimming. "Then we keep sailing, forever." Long silence. She looked around the deck one last time. Hundreds of faces waiting. A sea of unspoken prayers. Then, she said quietly, "Tell me what to do." The captain stepped aside, revealing a single door at the far end of the deck, small, black, pulsing faintly with light beneath its edges. "Behind it," he said, "is the ship's heart. Open it and let the sea in." Low metallic groan as the ship trembles. Mira walked toward it, the floor shifting beneath her feet, each step heavier than the last. The closer she came, the louder the heartbeat grew, not her own, but the ship's, steady, relentless. When she touched the handle, the world around her froze. Even the air stopped moving. She turned once more to the captain. He raised his hat in silent salute. "Safe voyage, Miss Lane." The sound of metal cracking, followed by a deep whoosh, the sea pouring in. The door opened, and the morning deck flooded with light, white, endless, and roaring. The passengers began to dissolve, their forms breaking into motes of salt and air, each one smiling as they vanished. Mira stood in the doorway, light pouring through her chest, until her outline flickered, and then she was gone too. The captain stood alone as the sea swallowed the deck. He watched the horizon fade, then whispered, almost gently, The voyage is over. The heartbeat stops. After a long pause, a faint sound returns an engine, faint and distant, turning over again. A voice crackles through the intercom, cheerful, bright, timeless. Good evening, passengers. Welcome aboard the Euphoria. Please enjoy your stay. There was no sea, no sky, no sound, only light, soft and colorless, stretching forever. Mira lay suspended in it, weightless as if she'd been dropped between two moments and forgotten there. Her body didn't ache. Her lungs didn't burn. She wasn't breathing, but she was thinking. And that was enough to know she hadn't escaped. A distant hum, like a ship's engine far below. Slowly, the light began to move. It folded inward, forming walls curved, metallic, rippling with reflections that weren't her own. The Euphoria was rebuilding itself, not as metal and wood, but as memory. Each reflection showed a different version of her. A uniformed officer at the helm, a passenger holding a ticket, a child waving from the dock, a woman standing alone, watching a ship vanish into fog. Each version turned toward her, each one whispering the same word, perfectly synchronized. Remember. Soft, crystalline chime echoes like water dripping in a cave. She reached out to touch one reflection. It rippled beneath her fingers, and suddenly, she was there. The dock. A storm building. People shouting as the Euphoria prepared to launch. She remembered this day, but it had never been hers. And yet, there she was, standing on the gangway, clipboard in hand, shouting orders. The captain beside her, younger, smiling. "Everything ready, Miss Lane?" She had nodded back then, proud, confident, her voice steady as she replied, "Yes, sir. She's ready for her maiden voyage." The hum deepens like the pulse of an engine waking. The memory froze. Rain suspended midair. Her reflection turned to face her again, eyes glowing faintly. "You built her to never stop," it said. "You were so afraid of endings." The truth struck her like a wave. She had designed the Euphoria not as a ship, but as a sanctuary. A vessel to preserve every soul lost at sea. A place where death would not mean disappearance. A ship that remembered, but something had gone wrong. The memories had grown teeth. The dead refused to fade, and the Euphoria began to feed on what it kept. Mira had tried to destroy it long ago, and failed. So it found her again, made her part of itself. Low, distorted chime like a bell heard underwater. She whispered into the void, "Then let me end it now." A voice answered, not the captain, not the ship, but something larger, ancient, and patient, the voice of the ocean itself. To end it, you must forget. Forget the ship. Forget yourself. Forget the sea. Her heart tightened. If she forgot, the Euphoria would die, but so would every memory it carried, every soul it had preserved. It would be as if none of them had ever lived. "There has to be another way," she whispered. "There isn't," the sea replied. "Memory is weight. Let go, and the ship sinks. Wind rises faintly, not real, but remembered." The walls of light began to ripple faster. Reflections flickered hundreds of faces, shouting silently from behind the glass. Passengers, crew, the captain, all of them waiting. Her reflection stepped closer again. It smiled sadly. "You gave us a home. Now give us rest." Tears blurred her vision. She pressed her hand to the wall. It was cold, trembling like skin before it breaks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for it to last this long." "You meant for it to last forever," the reflection answered. "That was the mistake." Deep rumble builds. The hum of the ship's heart begins again. Slower, weaker. The light dimmed. Beneath her, water returned dark and calm. The Euphoria rose one final time from the black, its decks empty, its windows glowing faintly like the eyes of a sleeping beast. Mira climbed aboard. The railings dripped with silver light. Every sound echoed, each step ringing like a bell. She reached the bridge. The wheel was there, motionless. A single key rested beside it, engraved with her initials, ML. She picked it up. "One last voyage," she whispered. Wind howls. The sound of metal creaking, tightening. She turned the key. The engine didn't start. Instead, the ship began to fade, planks turning to mist, walls melting into light, every part of it unbuilding itself, one memory at a time. Voices rose from below decks, not in fear, but in peace, thanking her, letting go. She stood at the bow, wind in her hair, the world dissolving around her. The horizon split open into pale, endless dawn. "You did it," the voice of the captain whispered faintly. "You let it go." "No," she said softly. "I let me go." Silence. The hum stops. Only the faint rush of air remains. The Euphoria vanished. The sea closed over where it had been, and for the first time in an eternity, the water was still. No wake, no echo, no sound, only calm. After a long pause, the faint sound of gulls, waves lapping on sand. Somewhere, far away, a piece of driftwood washed ashore. On it, half-faded letters spelled one word, Euphoria, and beside it, a single brass key. For a long time, there was only quiet. No ship, no wake, no name carried by the tide. The ocean slept. It took weeks for the waves to return, gentle, uncertain, as if remembering how to move. The sun touched the surface again, pale and warm, and for the first time in what felt like centuries, the sea was empty. But emptiness never lasts. A soft pulse beneath the water, faint, almost like a breath. Fishermen near the coast began to whisper about strange sounds beneath the waves. A hum, low, constant, not wind, not current. They said it came from deep below the continental shelf, a tone so low it could only be felt, not heard. A heartbeat. No one believed them, of course, not until the first piece washed ashore. A brass nameplate polished by salt and time. The word barely visible beneath the corrosion. Euphoria. Soft waves roll in. Seagulls distant. Then silence again. It happened slowly. Bits of wreckage. Fragments of memory surfacing where no wreck should be. A cabin door here. A single lifeboat, intact and dry. A logbook with no ink, just faint impressions pressed into the page. Each time, those who found them said they heard something. A woman's voice carried on the tide, soft, calm, repeating the same words. The voyage is over. But sometimes, late at night, the current would shift, and the same voice would whisper something else. All aboard. Low tone rises the deep hum again, like an engine trying to start. In the depths of the sea, light began to flicker. At first, a shimmer, then a shape. Ribs forming out of sand, hull from coral, windows blooming like eyes opening underwater. It wasn't a ship made of metal anymore. It was memory given form, again drawn back together by the echoes of what refused to fade. The Euphoria was returning, not as a vessel, but as a ghost of one. A reflection made of everything the sea had swallowed. Soft heartbeat builds calm, steady. And deep inside it, where the captain's quarters used to be, a faint light flickered behind a cracked mirror. A figure sat at the desk, head bowed, hair drifting weightlessly around her face. She wasn't breathing. She wasn't alive. But when the light moved across her hands, you could see a small brass key resting between her fingers. "I let it go," she whispered into the dark. "But the sea remembers." The mirror rippled, and in it, 1,000 faces flickered past. Passengers, crew, each smiling faintly, as if awakening from a dream. Waves fade. Silence. Then a single soft chime, like a bell underwater. Far above, the ocean was calm again. No storms, no fog, just a line of mist on the horizon, glowing faintly gold in the dawn. And from within that mist, a sound, a single ship's horn, long, distant, calling, then another, and another. An entire fleet of echoes answering from the dark, each one the memory of every voyage that had ever been lost, each one carrying whispers of those who could never rest. The sea itself had become a recorder, and every wave, a breath of what once was. The hum fades to nothing. Then, the soft creak of a deck, faint, like someone stepping aboard again. Somewhere, in the endless deep, a light flickers on, a corridor, a brass plaque, footsteps echoing down an empty hall. A woman's voice, calm and quiet, speaks through the static. "Good evening, passengers. Welcome aboard the Euphoria. Please enjoy your stay." Final line. Some ships don't sink, they remember. And the ship began to turn.
You've been listening to Nightmare Archives. If your heart's still beating, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because what you just heard was only one of many. There are darker trails still waiting to be uncovered. Sleep, if you can.